So obviously a lot of people are still talking about Zelina Vega and her shocking WWE departure on Friday. Of course, she was released by WWE. There is this whole discussion about independent contractors, Twitch streamers, unionization. It's all going off about Zelina Vega in WWE. And already people are talking about what's next for her. What's next in her post-WWE career? Is it on Twitch? Is it going to another wrestling company? Is she retired? What is she going to do next? And I'd like to talk a little bit about that today, and that I think potentially we could see Zelina Vega return to Impact Wrestling. Now, before we get into that, I must say, obviously, she has the typical WWE 90-day non-compete clause. That is standard for every WWE superstar talent that is released from their contract. Now, obviously, it's different when a superstar's contract expires. They can go anywhere they wish because there's no clause in the contract stating otherwise. But when they're released, when their contract is terminated, they have to adhere to the 90-day non-compete clause, which will be the same with Zelina Vega. Now, before we get into the reasons why I think Zelina Vega should return to Impact Wrestling, I think it's important to look at any other stories that have come out about Zelina Vega's WWE departure in the coming days. One that I do want to talk about is more details regarding Zelina Vega's WWE departure that specifically come from Dave Meltzer on the latest Wrestling Observer Radio. Now, according to Dave Meltzer, Zelina Vega failed to comply with the third-party edict handed down by WWE and Vince McMahon last month. This is all about the non-compliance with the likes of Twitch, Cameo, YouTube, etc. And Zelina Vega reportedly failed to comply with that and proceeded to open up a new OnlyFans account, which did not help her case among the WWE higher-ups. Of course, as I mentioned, this is according to Dave Meltzer of the latest Wrestling Observer Radio. Meltzer also noted that Vega was adamant in her position to continue with her Twitch account, and the backstory is she was among, quote, a couple of women who were making more money through social media than their WWE contracts. It says Vega was supposedly making a lot more money on Twitch prior to WWE asking talents to cease activity on their third-party platforms. And for Vega, it boiled down to choosing between WWE and Twitch, and she chose the latter, according to Meltzer. He said, quote, she made her choice and WWE had no option but to fire her, end quote. Now, before we carry on with the report there, what I do want to touch on there is obviously, Dave Meltzer has his sources within the company, and that quote is a WWE source, so take that with a pinch of salt. The quote, she made her choice and WWE had no option but to fire her, screams to me as someone higher up in WWE that has told Dave Meltzer, oh, we had no choice but to fire her. Not the other side of things where people would argue maybe WWE should rethink their whole strategy when it comes to the crackdown on third-party platforms, okay? So take that with a pinch of salt. When I read that, I went, well, that's a WWE source's opinion. There are two sides to every story. Now, Meltzer continued that since the old way of making money in WWE through house shows and pay-per-view paydays is no longer available to talents, they are looking at other revenue sources while working only 5 to 6 times a month since the start of the pandemic. Now, previously, talents who had those low guarantees, maybe like Zelina Vega and other people within the company, on their contracts were heavily reliant on paydays from house shows and pay-per-views. Now, while talents who signed contracts pre-AEW are the most unhappy due to their lower guarantees, talents who got bigger contracts post-AEW have been less vocal about the developing situation because their downside guarantee is much, much higher due to the competition of the new promotion in Jacksonville. Now, with WWE taking talent's ability to make money off streaming platforms, there is, according to Meltzer, growing resentment in the locker room. Not that that means anything. I think we hear these stories about bad morale, low morale in WWE every week for a variety of reasons. But what I will say is that this issue, as I've mentioned several times now when I've been covering this, isn't necessarily about Twitch. It's about the larger overlapping issue of the independent contractors, of WWE's treatment of talent, of money. It always boils down to money at the end of the day. And what WWE are doing in this instance is taking money out of the pockets of their talent for no viable reason other than WWE wants the money for themselves. So obviously there is growing resentment. Will that lead to unionization? I really do doubt it at the moment. It's not impossible. It's not impossible. Like with any type of social change or change in general, you need big people to get involved. Whether or not we'll see that, I don't know. Now, Meltzer said, quote, with no house shows or pay-per-views, they need a way to augment the past money that WWE took it away from them. On the flip side, WWE maintains that it should get a slice of the revenue that the talent makes on Twitch by utilizing their WWE names, albeit in third-party platforms. Now, again, that argument for me, I disagree with. I understand WWE's point of view if they have Zelina Vega using a Twitch account, or if they have Paige using a Twitch account. That is a WWE name. That is a WWE intellectual property. That is a character that WWE have invested their time and money in, and it shouldn't be for Zelina Vega or Paige or whoever to make money off of that name and character. I totally agree with that. It is the same if that Chris Hemsworth started a Twitch channel as Thor. Marvel would have every right to be PO'd with that, because that's their name, that's their character. They've invested the money and time into building that brand. But if Thea Trinidad goes on Twitch, that is not the same. WWE doesn't own the name Thea Trinidad, and they certainly don't own the person. Just because Thea Trinidad looks and sounds like Zelina Vega doesn't mean it's the same character, because it's not. It's the real person. And WWE, despite what Vince McMahon thinks, doesn't actually own a person's real name or look and likeness. They just don't. Now, WWE, of course, is reportedly in the process of doing their own Twitch deal and giving a percentage of that revenue to talents. I always think about that, and the percentage will be counted against their downside guarantees, which is another bit of information that hasn't sat well with some talents, as I'm not really surprised with that, because, I mean, you've just had this revenue stream taken away from you. And a lot of people, it wasn't just a revenue stream, it was an outlet for fun, and an outlet to help their mental health, de-stress, interact with their fans, and it's taken away from you and then told you have to do it for your job. It doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel right. So I'm not surprised if talents are going, you take it away from me, to then telling me I have to do it and you have to take the money. What is that? It's disturbing. It's disturbing. So I'll be interested to see what talent does when it comes to that. Now, as I mentioned, Zelina Vega returned to her Twitch feed on Friday within a few hours of her WWE release. And as I mentioned, she is serving the customary WWE 90-day non-compete clause, which prevents her from appearing on television for any other wrestling promotion until mid-February 2021, which transitions nicely into Zelina Vega maybe returning to Impact Wrestling. Now, if she does return to Impact Wrestling, she, as I just mentioned, isn't returning until February 2021. Now, why would Zelina Vega go to Impact? I know a lot of people are saying, well, if she's going to go anywhere, considering her status in WWE, considering her achievements in WWE and in pro wrestling, she would go straight to AEW, right? She's too big to go to Impact. Well, that is completely wrong. Why would Zelina Vega go to Impact Wrestling? Well, Zelina Vega has history with the company. Zelina Vega's first steps in professional wrestling were with Impact Wrestling. Zelina Vega was discovered by Tommy Dreamer, and she wrestled a tryout match for Total Nonstop Action Wrestling, TNA Impact, at a television taping on January 11th, 2011. She lost to Angelina Love. But then only a couple of weeks later, she had signed with the company. And on the February 10th episode of Impact in 2011, Thea Trinidad, under the ring name Rosita, debuted as a storyline cousin of Sarita in an 8 knockout tag team match where the two of them teamed with Madison Rayne and Tara and defeated Angelina Love, Mickie James, Velvet Sky and Winter, and Rosita actually got the pinfall on Velvet Sky during that match. Anyway, so let's go into her history with Impact Wrestling. On the March 13th, 2011 at Victory Road, Rosita and Sarita defeated Angelina Love and Winter. Yes, do you remember Winter? What a crazy storyline that was. To win the TNA Knockouts Tag Team Championships. A championships that just so happens to be returning soon, easy for me to say. So Rosita, Zelina Vega, Thea Trinidad, easy for me to say, is a former Knockouts Tag Team Champion. During this time is when you had the faction of Mexican America in Impact Wrestling. This was an alliance with Rosita, Sarita, and Hernandez. They were later joined by Anarquia, and the four of them would be Mexican America in Impact Wrestling. You know, I wasn't a massive fan of the faction and the stable. I think that idea, they were trying to recreate LAX, and that just, it felt like someone else's warmed up dinner, to be honest. It just wasn't for me. I thought Rosita and Sarita, though, were a fantastic tag team, and I thought, given at that time, the Knockouts Tag Team Championships had already kind of lose their glisten to them, and it felt like, given the regime there at the time of Hogan, Bischoff, I think even Bruce Pritchard would be involved by then. and maybe even Vince Russo. I'm not sure how long he was there. I'm not sure even sure if he was there at this point. It's so hard to keep up with the timelines of all these people in Impact at the time, but it felt like the Knockouts Tag Team Championships had already started to fall to the back of people's mind at the higher ups. So eventually they lost those tag team championships to Miss Tessmacher and Tara in July of that year. But they had feuds against the likes of the Beautiful People and Mickie James and Madison Rayne and Tara and that kind of deal. But after they lost the Knockouts Tag Team Championship, both Rosita and Sarita went inactive from Impact Wrestling, and Arkia left the promotion, Hernandez turned face, and eventually Mexican America was ended only a couple of months really after being around. It was around for what? I don't know, 6 months at most. And then eventually Zelina Vega, Thea Trinidad, her contract with Impact Wrestling expired in January of 2013, and she parted ways with the promotion. So obviously she had a brief run there, and she was well known for having that run in Impact Wrestling. Now, as I mentioned, she has the 90-day non-compete clause at the moment that she's serving with WWE, but you have to look at her achievements and her run with Impact Wrestling in the past. I mentioned she's a former Knockouts Tag Team Champion. The Knockouts Tag Team Championships are returning. We now have the brackets for the Knockouts Tag Team Championship returning in Impact Wrestling. Of course, I think the tournament starts this week on Impact Wrestling, and then we're going to crown the champions at Hard to Kill in January. And you also have to look at the wider Knockouts division, to be honest, because I know I always say this whenever I talk about the Knockouts division in Impact Wrestling, but I think it has to be said over and over and over again because it's absolutely true. The Knockouts division is one of the best women's division in the world. It's got some of the best talent, it's got some of the best booking, and the fact that they're getting the Knockouts Tag Team Championship shows that Impact Wrestling are committed. They're investing in this Knockouts division because they know it's a cornerstone of their product. They know it's a huge selling point of their product. It's, as I mentioned, some of the best women's wrestling, some of the best wrestling you're going to see around, some of the best booked wrestling. The strength in depth when it comes to that Knockouts division is superb, and you have so much going on in it. You have multiple storylines, you have multiple matches, now you've got multiple championships. If Zelina Vega is looking to wrestle, which may be what she's looking to do. Yes, she was famous in WWE for being a manager. She'd kind of just transitioned into being a wrestler, had feuds against the likes of Asuka and a couple of championship matches, and did well in those championship matches. Maybe she's like, well, if I go to AEW, am I going to be put in that managerial position again? If I go to Impact, I know I'm going to work, and maybe I want to prove that I can work. Maybe I want to be Knockouts champion, and she can be Knockouts champion if she goes to Impact Wrestling. So I think that's a tick there. But you also have to look at potential opponents for her in Impact Wrestling should she go there. And I think you look at these potential opponents, it's a very interesting proposition. Again, I don't want to turn this into an AEW versus Impact kind of deal, but if you're going to weigh up who has the better talent in their women's division, Impact Wrestling is going to win that argument every single day. I would be very interested in seeing Zelina Vega versus Dionna Perazo, and we'll touch on Dionna Perazo in a second. But Dionna Perazo and Zelina Vega are actually very close friends. When Zelina Vega was released by WWE on Friday, Dionna Perazo went straight to social media, said that was her best friend. Obviously, they are close from their period of time when they were both in NXT. So if you're best friends, you're going to have excellent chemistry in the ring. It's just without a doubt you're going to have that extra element of chemistry. You know each other, you know each other's movesets, you know the way the other person thinks. So maybe, Zelina Vega versus Dionna Perazo in Impact Wrestling, that would be really interesting. I think someone like Jordynne Grace versus Zelina Vega would be incredibly interesting for me to see, because Jordynne Grace, obviously we know about the power that she has. We know about the ability that she has to throw people around, and also as a technical wrestler too, but she's a powerhouse. And I think of someone of the size of Jordynne Grace and has the power of Jordynne Grace. You mention this all the time when it comes to boxing and MMA. Styles make fights, and it's the same in pro wrestling. Styles make matches. I think someone of the size and strength of Jordynne Grace going up against someone like Zelina Vega, who is smaller, more nimble. I just think of some of the real interesting things that they could do in the match in terms of a storytelling point of view, where Jordynne Grace could throw Zelina Vega all around the ring, do some really nice spots. I think that's really interesting. It would be a David versus Goliath type of match, which you don't always see in women's wrestling. You do see them in matches like whenever Nia Jax has those matches. It tends to be, bigger versus smaller, so David versus Goliath. but I think Jordynne Grace is by far a better worker than someone like a Nia Jax. So I think a match between Jordynne Grace and Zelina Vega, that really interests me. I think that could be very compelling and very interesting to see there. Obviously, I think you could, as I mentioned, Rosita when she was with Impact Wrestling, Thea Trinidad, Zelina Vega, when she was there, Madison Rayne was still there, and she's still with the company now. Obviously, Madison Rayne is on commentary, and she doesn't wrestle as often now, but she still occasionally wrestles matches. I think Madison Rayne going up against Zelina Vega would be very interesting. Again, this is what I always say about Impact Wrestling, is that they have at this point been around for 18 years. Crazy as it seems, they have been around for 18 years at this point, and you have to make the most of that history. You have to make the most of how you've gotten to where you are today. And they've obviously got the Impact Plus service, the streaming service, and they like to show all of the old episodes of Impact on there. Some of the Explosion matches, obviously, they do Impact Plus exclusive events like Turning Point this past weekend. And I think you could actually play very nicely that Madison Rayne and Rosita were there with Impact back in the day. They're both here now. And you can do that sort of old school versus new school I mentioned about Knockouts Tag Team Championships. Perhaps Zelina Vega comes in and tags with Madison Rayne. You know, we're trying to take the old TNA back. They could do something like that. I think that would be interesting. I also look at the likes of Rosemary versus Zelina Vega. That to me is really interesting because obviously Rosemary's character is so strong. And her character is so strong that she can do this wacky stuff like the Johnny Bravo stuff. She can do this wacky stuff with James Mitchell and all of this sort of cinematic stuff. But fundamentally in the ring she can go as well. And I think Zelina Vega, I think she would look at someone like a Rosemary and say, you know what, we could do some really interesting stuff there. We could do some really unique and different storylines. And again, not to compare it to AEW, but I think it's important when assessing your options. You look at an Impact and then an AEW, are you going to get that kind of thing or that kind of opportunity to do these sort of unique, weird, off-the-wall kind of angles and storylines in AEW? I don't think you are. Not the fact that they couldn't. They have characters similar to Rosemary in AEW, the likes of Abaddon, but is Abaddon versus Zelina Vega, is that going to get more than 5 minutes every week on Dynamite? It just isn't. It just isn't because fundamentally, when it comes to AEW, their booking of the women's division is a one match per week, 5 minutes, one match on a pay-per-view, one storyline at one time, at any time in AEW. And if it's got Brandy Rhodes, you can have maybe two. That's the way it works in AEW. And in comparison to that in Impact, you've just got more freedom. You've got more freedom. You've got more ability to do more stuff. So I think, again, a Zelina Vega versus Rosemary feud, that's very interesting as well. Su Yung, Susie. Again, I'm interested seeing that. There's all of these matches, and then I can carry on. Taya Valkyrie versus Zelina Vega. What a great match that would be. We all know the ability of Taya Valkyrie. We all know she's a former Knockouts champion. And can you imagine the matches of Taya Valkyrie versus Zelina Vega? How great would that be? Tenille Dashwood. I can't recall. I think would Tenille Dashwood and Zelina Vega, were they around at the same time in WWE? I'm not sure if they would be. I think they missed each other there. I think so, because Tenille Dashwood, Emma was released in WWE 2016, I think maybe, and Zelina Vega came up to the main roster in 2018, I think. So I think they would have missed each other by a couple of years. But again, two great wrestlers that could have fantastic matches. So again, there are so many possibilities for Zelina Vega there in Impact Wrestling, and I think if she was wise, I think if she looked at the options available to her when it comes to Impact or it comes to AEW, I think she would just look, the talent is better in Impact, the opportunity to do things is better in Impact, I'm going to get more TV time, maybe it's going to be a lesser viewership, but I'm going to get more TV time in Impact, I'm going to get more opportunity to wrestle and work, I've got all of these great opponents. I'm going to be in these great storylines. There is a commitment to women's wrestling and Impact. To me, it's just night and day because, again, you compare the Knockouts division to AEW's women's division, it's not even close. It's not even close. And even, I think Serena Deeb came out over the last couple of days and said, well, the problem is when in AEW, their women's division, we're dealing with a lot of inexperience. And I think that argument at this point is BS. I really do think that argument is just nonsensical BS at this point because the idea that, the AEW Women's Division, it's not great because there's inexperience, that's not true. That is not true. You've got females working in there that maybe they are inexperienced. You've also got very experienced people in there. The issue is when it comes to the AEW Women's Division, the fundamental issue is when it comes to the AEW Women's Division is the lack of booking. The lack of booking and the lack of interest in the AEW higher-ups to actually make women's wrestling work. That is it, unless your name's Brandy Rhodes. That is it. That is it. Fundamentally, that is it. One match per week, the token women's match on Dynamite. 5 minutes long. That is it. One storyline at any time. That is it. But then you flip over to Impact, you've got multiple women's matches. You've got knockouts matches main eventing the show or TV events. You've got multiple storylines, you've got multiple championships. All of that sort of stuff, it's night and day. It is just night and day. Now, obviously, when it comes to Zelina Vega, you have to talk about Aleister Black. Now, a lot of people are questioning the future of Aleister Black. What's going to be his situation when it comes to WWE? Is he going to be leaving? Obviously, there's been a lot of discussion and reports about Aleister Black requesting to go to NXT. And is Aleister Black going to go to NXT? Again, I don't know when it comes to that. I don't know if Aleister Black is going to leave. I don't know if he's going to stay. I don't know if he's going to go to NXT. Obviously, I would assume it goes without saying he can't be happy right now. If he's requesting to go to NXT and that was denied, he can't be happy. The report from WrestleVote said there was dissension on both sides. If the company you work for has just sacked your wife for reasons that you don't believe in, of course you're not going to be happy. I mentioned before, though, WWE is more than happy to pay someone to sit at home. So again, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case, of paying someone to sit at home. I don't think they want to release Aleister Black. I think they would probably want to keep him there. Obviously, we've seen what they did with the likes of Pac. Neville. When he was in WWE, they froze his contract at one point to say, well, if you don't come in, we can just freeze your contract. I'm not saying that's going to happen with Aleister Black, but it certainly is a possibility. Now, is wherever Zelina Vega goes, is Aleister Black going to go? That's not guaranteed. It's possibility. So if Zelina Vega goes to Impact Wrestling, perhaps Aleister Black could go to Impact Wrestling. I think Aleister Black, his decision is different from Zelina Vega. It is fundamentally different because of the way that women's wrestling is booked. If, Aleister Black could easily go to AEW and he could be a world champion in AEW. He could easily be a world champion in Impact Wrestling. The difference there is both companies are committed to male wrestling and having multiple storylines, multiple matches, and having men main event the show. AEW isn't when it comes to women's wrestling, whereas Impact Wrestling is. That is the difference. That is the difference when you come to Zelina Vega and assessing her options when it comes to Impact Wrestling. Now, another factor about Zelina Vega possibly going to Impact Wrestling is Tommy Dreamer. Now, I mentioned at the start of when I was talking about Zelina Vega's history with Impact Wrestling is that Tommy Dreamer was the one who essentially discovered Zelina Vega. He was the one that discovered her, got her into wrestling, helped train her, got her an opportunity to work in Impact Wrestling in the first place. And Tommy Dreamer still works with Impact Wrestling today. He is a creative writer. He helps write out some of the storylines. He's a backstage producer. And as I mentioned, Tommy Dreamer helped discover her. And Tommy Dreamer's been heavily involved very recently when it comes to Impact Wrestling, as I mentioned. He's not only a producer and a creative writer, but he was one of the brains behind the Wrestle House series, which was incredibly successful for Impact Wrestling. Absolutely loved Wrestle House. I thought it was very, very good. Obviously, he's heavily involved now with the Johnny Bravo stuff. I don't know if he specifically wrote that segment, because I don't think he did. I think it was that ex-WWE writer that wrote that segment, but he's obviously highly involved when it comes to that, producing that. Obviously, he's the detective on TV as well. So that relationship is there. So on top of the history that Zelina Vega has with Impact, she's got relationships in the company, in higher up positions, like with Tommy Dreamer. Now, I mentioned Dionna Perazo. Dionna Perazo is also very close friends with Zelina Vega. She's best friends with Zelina Vega. So you look at all of these factors in play here. You've got Tommy Dreamer, the existing relationship there. You've got a previous run in Impact Wrestling, so you've got history there. You've got her best friend there, Dionna Perazo. You've got multiple pulls, essentially, for Zelina Vega to come into Impact Wrestling. And I think if she does come in, look, she is a talent in Impact that you really could build the division around. You really could. And it would just be another fantastic addition to what is already an incredibly stacked division when it comes to the Knockouts division in Impact Wrestling. She could easily be Knockouts champion. I think she could be a huge star. She could be the face of the division. She can talk. She can work. And I think also as well, this is interesting, is that we didn't see a lot of Zelina Vega's work in Impact Wrestling, in WWE rather, because we saw her mainly as the mouthpiece for Andrade, for Angel Garza, at times for Austin Theory, And she did an excellent job of that. If anything, she really helped propel Andrade to becoming the NXT champion and having a big run on the main roster, or reasonably big run on the main roster. A lot of that was Zelina Vega because of the package of coming together and her being a talker. And we didn't see a lot of her work. We only saw a tiny bit of it, and then she was obviously just released recently. We only saw her work with Asuka, really. That was her main program. Obviously, we saw her time to time work mixed tags or Women's Royal Rumbles or maybe at the Evolution pay-per-view in 2018. But to me, that works in Impact Wrestling's benefit too, because she fits the mold of recent signings of Impact Wrestling. And by that, I mean she has a chip on her shoulder. She has a massive chip on her shoulder. She wants to come into Impact Wrestling. One, she wants to show people that I'm more than just a manager, I can work. And if you've watched Thea Trinidad prior to WWE of her work in Impact, you know that she could work. You saw her matches against Asuka, you know that she can work. But coming in, she'll have this chip on her shoulder. She can come in and she can say, look, I want to prove to people I can work. I want to prove to people I can be a champion. I want to prove that WWE, even though, you know, it was over an issue about work, not about work really, it was about, you know, Twitch and Cameo and OnlyFans and that kind of deal. I want to prove to people they were wrong to let me go. They're going to regret it. I want to prove that, and it fits that mold. It's the same with Heath. It was the same with Eric Young. It was the same with EC3, and they come in and they've got this chip on their shoulder. If they were wrong to let me go, I'm going to prove them wrong. And I think Zelina Vega fits in that mold. And when she comes in also to Impact, this is important as well, because fundamentally this is the reason why she left WWE in the first place. When it comes to Twitch, when it comes to Cameo, when she comes into Impact Wrestling, she can do what she wants. Like I said, she's not going to be leaving Twitch. She's still doing this Twitch stuff. She did it as soon as she got released. And the report said she was making more money doing Twitch than she was with WWE. So if she comes in to Impact Wrestling, she can carry on with doing all that sort of stuff. She can do Twitch, she can do Cameo, she can do OnlyFans, she can make the big amount of money that she was making on there, plus she can get a good contract with Impact too. So, I mean, is she going to make as much money on the Impact contract as she was with her WWE contract? Probably not. But given those different revenue streams that would be available to her, Twitch, and she could focus more time on it, Cameo, I said OnlyFans, and then now the Impact, she could do very, very well. Let's not suggest that Zelina Vega is going to be in the poorhouse because of this, because she's not. I massively credit her, and I have a huge amount of respect for her because she stood up for what she believed in. And if anything, she's actually taken a calculated risk here and gone, actually, I could get a good contract with Impact or AEW, I could make good money there. I'm allowed to do Twitch, I'm allowed to do Cameo, I'm allowed to do all of this sort of stuff. I make good money on there anyway. I could do really well here. If anything, it probably benefits me to leave WWE. And plus, she's got the acting revenue or acting stream to go down. She's been an actress. She was obviously in Fighting With My Family, the movie about Paige's life. Now, obviously, I've seen some discussion, and I think this is ridiculous, to be honest. I've seen some discussion about, well, what company would touch her? What company would even bother to hire Zelina Vega right now? Because she left WWE because of this independent contractor stuff. And I always like to think of that when people are saying that, going, this might make her unattractive to other companies to hire. But you have to realise that the whole issue when it came to independent contractors, that was a microcosm of the Twitch and third-party platform situation. WWE superstars, I don't think, have ever been happy with this whole third-party platform stuff. And when it comes to the independent contractor stuff, WWE superstars and talent, they've never been happy about it. Any company talent has never been happy with it. WCW back in the day, Impact Wrestling, AEW now. No one, if you would poll any professional wrestler, this whole independent contractor thing, I think 99.9% of people would say, you know what, I wish I was an employee, or I wish if I'm an independent contractor, I was treated like an independent contractor, but they'd almost resign themselves, you know what, it's never going to change. It's never going to change, it's the way it's always been, whatever. And as I mentioned, full transparency, it's not just WWE, it's that way for all pro wrestling companies. WWE, AEW, Impact, WCW back in the day, whoever. But when WWE drew this line about the third-party platform stuff, people rightfully so said that's BS. You can't do that when we're independent contractors. You can't control our dates like that and our lives like that when we're independent contractors. And then it raised the question, wait, independent contractors, that argument's come up again. Why are we independent contractors? So there's been some questions that I've seen saying, would Impact Wrestling be really willing to sign Zelina Vega? She did just say she supports unionization, by the way. Does that make her persona non grata when it comes to pro wrestling? I don't think so. I really don't think so. I think it is something that might follow Zelina Vega. I think if she signs with the companies, people might say, well, you've said you support unionization and you don't want to be an independent contractor, but you've signed with Impact Wrestling and now you're an independent contractor again. What a hypocrite. And again, it's just, that is such a ridiculous argument, because the answer is yes, but I'm treated like I'm an independent contractor. That is the difference. In WWE, you're labeled an independent contractor, but you're not treated like one. Because an independent contractor is more than able to use Twitch, Cameo, YouTube, whatever. They're more than able to take outside bookings. They're not in WWE. If you're an independent contractor in Impact Wrestling, you can use Twitch, you can use Cameo, you can take outside bookings. You don't own the real name. And that's the argument here. It's not about, obviously the classification of independent contractors is one thing, but I think the real argument is about the treatment of independent contractors. If you're an independent contractor and WWE insists on labeling their talent as independent contractors, fine, but treat them like an independent contractor. Don't make them an independent contractor and then attempt to have control over them like an employee but without the benefits. So that's, I think, the major argument there. And I think going back, and we'll tie this up here, Impact Wrestling, I don't think they would care about what Zelina Vega's past was when it comes to WWE and the way she left the company. Impact, they know the talent that she is, and they know the drawing power that she has. Impact Wrestling, of course, would want Zelina Vega. Why wouldn't you? She's a massive talent, she's a name, she's well known. So I think you'd be stupid to say, well, we're not going to touch her because of that. I think that would be ridiculous. So I don't buy into that at all. So ultimately, where does she go? Where does she go? Where does she go to Impact? Does she go to AEW? Look, AEW would want Zelina Vega, obviously, because they need to improve their women's division. If Zelina Vega coming in doesn't change the fact that AEW doesn't know how to book a women's division, though. Fundamentally, that doesn't change anything. AEW could bring in Trish Stratus and Lita in their prime, and they wouldn't know how to book a women's division because they don't. They're not committed to women's wrestling. They're just not. And I know that upsets some people, and they'll say, oh, they are, it's just inexperience, or they're a young company. BS. If they're a young company, how come every other division they have, they've booked correctly? The facts are there. We're like 18 months into this company, nearly 2 years at this point. They don't know how to book women's wrestling. Impact Wrestling obviously would want her. I think, considering the ties that she has with Impact Wrestling, the Tommy Dreamer, Dionna Perazo, her history with the company, the Knockouts division, the strength of the Knockouts division, Impact's commitment to women's wrestling when it comes to the Knockouts Championship, the Knockouts Tag Team Championship, I just think it's night and day, and it's an easy decision to make that I think she should return to Impact Wrestling once her 90-day non-compete clause expires. But of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on Zelina Vega's next move in pro wrestling? Where do you think she'll go? Do you think she'll go to AEW, to Impact, or do you think she'll stay out of pro wrestling at all? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll be sure to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, chat about pro wrestling and chatting about all things Impact, WWE and AEW. So be sure to leave a comment and I'll be sure to respond to you guys there. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button. Really does help us out here on YouTube, go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video, along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.